Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're going to take a look at my team selection for round 1 in World Cup Fantasy. So let's get started. So before we start taking a look at the players, I'm just going to do a little reminder of what my booster strategy is going to be for the tournament. So I'm going to be using the 12th man booster in round 2, then I'm going to use the wild card in round 3. I'm going to use the qualification booster at the first opportunity we get to use it, which is the round of 32. And then the mystery booster, if it's going to be the clean sheet shield that we think it's going to be, then I'll use that in the round of 16. And then the max captain I'm going to use in either the semi-final or the final. So the most important thing here is that I'm not going to have a booster active for round 1 because I've decided that I am going to be sticking with the 12th man in round 2. And then my wild card is going to be used in round 3. So that means for this team selection, I'm going to be focusing on the fixtures in round 1 and in round 2. So we're going to start off with some clean sheet odds. The clean sheet odds and the goal projections that I'm using in today's video have come from FPL Joe's website, and I'm going to leave a link to his website down in the description because I think it's a really useful website for World Cup Fantasy and for FPL when that comes back as well, because this website uses the live betting odds to give us clean sheet percentages and projected goals, and because they're live, that means that when the betting markets start getting some potential early team news, we tend to see either like drops or spikes in the numbers, and that can be a good indication for us for who's playing for the teams. So for example, in game week 38 in FPL, Haaland wasn't playing for Man City, and one of the reasons we knew this was because the goals that Man City were projected for that match started like randomly dropping like 2 hours before the deadline for FPL. So then we started thinking that there was probably a chance that Haaland wasn't going to play because it was such a huge drop in the goals, and then it turned out that he wasn't playing. So definitely check his website out. I'll leave a link in the description. And now we'll get into the clean sheet odds. So for these clean sheet odds in this list, I have included all the teams where when you add up their clean sheet odds for round 1 and round 2, it adds up to at least 90%. So at the top, we've got Spain, have got the highest clean sheets for round 1 and round 2. And then it is France, then Germany, then Colombia, Portugal, Switzerland, Canada, Brazil, Uruguay, Ecuador, Mexico, Argentina, England, Belgium, and then finally Norway are at the bottom. So now we're going to take a look at my favourite goalkeepers for round 1 and round 2. So like I said in my last video, my plan for picking my goalkeepers is to look for goalkeepers that have got good clean sheet odds, but they're quite cheap and are going to get the scouting bonus, so they are under 5% owned. And so my 3 favourite goalkeepers that currently meet all of that criteria are Vargas from Colombia, Galindez from Ecuador, and then Crepau from Canada. And so the 2 goalkeepers that have made it into my team currently are Vargas from Colombia and Crepau from Canada. The reason I've gone for these 2 is because they're currently the lowest owned out of my favourites, but I am quite concerned that both of these goalkeepers are potentially going to go over 5% owned by the deadline. So I do have a few other goalkeepers that I'm thinking about from the clean sheet odds that we looked at that I could potentially include. So that includes like the Ecuador goalkeeper, the Uruguay goalkeeper as well. But I also have a feeling that they're going to end up over 5%. So I have started thinking about a few other options for what I'm going to do if all of these goalkeepers do go above 5%. And so my first option is going to be, so as I said before about the clean sheet list going down to 90% clean sheet odds across the 2 match days. I might have to start looking a little bit lower than that, and maybe go down to like 80% added together for the 2 match days and see what options that gives me. But if I don't like any of those options, something else that I thought of is I could potentially choose one goalkeeper that's got really good clean sheet odds just in match day 1 but not necessarily in match day 2, and then my second one could be more focused on match day 2, so they've got good clean sheet odds in match day 2 but not in match day 1. So if I decided to go with that route, one of my goalkeepers would probably be one of the ones I had on my list in my last video, my match day 1 and my round 1 first look, But then the second one, I'll have to take a look at the round 2 clean sheet odds in a little bit more detail to see what I'm thinking there. So now for the defenders. Like I said in my last video, I think the ideal structure for your defenders is to go for 2 of the more premium defenders and then go for 3 cheaper differential defenders. So some of my favourite more premium defenders are Mendes from Portugal, Kimmich from Germany, and then Kabasi from Spain. Now with Spain, I think it's really difficult because they've obviously got the highest clean sheet odds for both of the first 2 rounds at 63% and 67%. But because they're quite a strong team with a lot of depth, I think they're going to rotate a lot of their players for the first 2 fixtures. There's a chance they could put out like one team in the first round and then a completely different team in the second round. And trying to predict who's going to play in which match, I think, is quite difficult. But one player that I do potentially think could play in both is Kabasi. If you're willing to take a little bit more risk with going for a Spain defender, then I would recommend Cucurella because he is probably the most attacking option, but I'm just not too confident that he's going to start both rounds that we need to be targeting for this setup. And then moving into the cheaper and differential defenders, my favourites are Elvedi from Switzerland, Oliveira from Uruguay, Cornelius from Canada, Mojica from Colombia, and Ordonez from Ecuador. Okay, and then for the defenders in my team, the 2 premium ones I've gone for are Nuno Mendes and Kimmich. This is mainly because I'm just not sure I can trust the Spain defenders' minutes, so I decided to avoid the Spain defenders and stick with the other 2. And then for the 3 cheaper differential defenders, I've got Elvedi, Oliveira, and Ordonez. And so the reason I went for those 3 is because my 5 favourite defences to try and target with the differential scouting bonus are probably Colombia, Canada, Switzerland, Uruguay, and Ecuador. And I already had the Colombia and Canada goalkeeper in the team, and these aren't defenders, even though I think they're good options, they're not ones I want to be doubled up on. So I decided to go for the 3 that I hadn't already picked for the defenders. Like with the goalkeepers, I am quite concerned about these defenders staying under 5% owned, but I am a little bit more hopeful than with the goalkeepers that I'm going to be able to at least stick with the defences that I'm trying to target. So Colombia, Canada, Switzerland, Uruguay, and Ecuador, they do have other options that are also quite lowly owned, so I should be able to stick within those defences. But if not, I think I should still be able to stick within the defences at least that were on my clean sheet list for this video, because Mexico have got a few options as well, although they are slightly more expensive, but they are probably going to stay under 5%. And then Argentina have got a few nice options as well, so it should be easier to stay with the higher clean sheet odds. But once again, like with the goalkeepers, unfortunately those 3 positions in my team just aren't really locked in yet. So now moving on to the projected goals. So for the projected goals, I only included teams that had a minimum combined of 3.5 projected goals for the 2 rounds. So at the top we've got Spain, and then it's Germany, then Brazil, then Portugal, then France, then Switzerland, then it's Norway, then Uruguay, England, Colombia, Argentina, Belgium, Canada, and Ecuador. So quite a similar list to their clean sheet odds. We're mainly targeting the same teams in both. And now looking at some of my favourite midfielders. So the main one that's not on this list that I had in my matchday 1 first look is Yamal. And this is because the more recent reports that have come out have suggested that although he's definitely training and is probably pretty much recovered from his injury, because he hasn't played any minutes in a game yet because Spain have had their last friendly and Yamal did not take part, I just don't think it's realistic at all that Yamal is going to play many minutes at all in the first round. He's definitely not going to start, probably looking at 5 to 20 minutes, somewhere in that range. So for me, even though he's probably still going to be quite highly owned, I just can't justify picking him when probably only going to get 20 minutes out of him max. But then for the midfielders that I do like for round 1 and round 2, firstly we've got Elise from France. So in my last video I said I thought Elise was maybe going under the radar a little bit. I didn't think people were talking about him too much. But then after I posted that video, he went and scored a hat-trick in France's last friendly match they had. So I don't think he's really going under the radar anymore. His ownership's definitely gone up a fair bit from when I last spoke about him. So he's still a good option. And then the other midfielders I like are Bruno Fernandes from Portugal, Rafinha from Brazil, Wirtz from Germany, Valverde from Uruguay, De Bruyne from Belgium, Rodriguez from Colombia, and then Xhaka from Switzerland. So the 5 midfielders that have made it into my team are Bruno Fernandes, Rafinha, Florian Wirtz, Rodriguez and Xhaka, and I am honestly really happy with this midfield, and I don't really have plans on changing it. I think this is basically locked in unless any of these players were to get injured. So my goal with the midfielders is to be picking players that are like essentially the talisman of their team. So we're looking for the players that are on set pieces, and on penalties as well. And all 5 of these have at least set pieces or penalties, if not both. Rodriguez and Xhaka are both currently under 5% owned. They are in like the high 4%, so I'm not too sure that they're going to stay under 5%, especially Rodriguez, as his ownership has been going up. Xhaka, there's maybe a chance because his ownership has been dropping rather than increasing. I think I mentioned that in my last video. I think then he was at 5% and now he has dropped. He's at, I think, 4.7 now. So there's maybe a chance that Xhaka stays under 5%. But either way, whether these 2 midfielders stay under or not, they are going to be in my team because they are both on penalties for their team and have some set pieces, and they've got some good projected goals for both match days as well. So yeah, midfield pretty locked in. So now moving on to the forwards. My favourite forwards for round 1 and round 2 are Mbappe from France, Haaland from Norway, Oyarzabal from Spain, Havertz from Germany, and then the other one I've put on this list is Enner Valencia from Ecuador, and I've put him on the list for if your team's structured slightly different to mine. So in my midfield I've got Xhaka and Rodriguez that are both quite cheap players, but if you've gone for some more expensive midfielders in those spot in your team to afford that, you're probably looking for a cheaper forward. And my favourite for round 1 and round 2 is Enner Valencia, as he is going to be the penalty taker for Ecuador, and he should be under 5% owned as well. So then the 3 forwards that have made it into my team are Mbappe, Haaland and Oyarzabal. I mentioned in my last video that if Yamal wasn't fit, I thought Oyarzabal was the best Spain attacker to go for, because he's going to be on penalties, so that is why he is now in my team. Like with the midfield, my front line I'm pretty locked in on unless any of them were to get injured. I'm really happy with these 3. I think it's probably a little bit template. I think you're going to see a lot of people with Mbappe, Haaland and Oyarzabal, but sometimes the template is the template for a reason, and I just think they're the best 3 to go for. As you can see on the graphic above me, I've got 1.9 million in the bank with this team, so that gives me a little bit of flexibility when it comes to having to change some of my defenders and goalkeepers to try and keep them under 5%. If I have to go for some of the ones that are slightly more expensive, like the Mexico ones, I think they're all 4.7 million, then I'm going to be able to do that easy. So now I've just changed the view of my team so that we can see how I've got my team set up, and I've put the dates on. So we can talk a little bit about the captaincy and the subs, just for a little reminder of how that works. So starting off with the captaincy, in this team I've got my captaincy on my goalkeeper from Canada because he is going to be my first player, and then my vice captain is on Elvedi from Switzerland. So with the captaincy, we want to remember that we've got unlimited changes to make throughout the round. So you want to start with your captaincy on your very first player in the match day, and then just every time you've had a captaincy on a player, you're just going to decide, are you happy with that amount of points? If yes, just keep it on them. If not, move it on to your next player. And then you just keep going through with that process until you get to a score that you're happy with for your captain. With the vice captain, I don't really know why they've included it, to be honest. We don't really need a vice captain when we've got unlimited changes, but they have, so we just need to be careful with the vice captain, because in Club World Cup Fantasy last year, there was a few issues where if you had a vice captain on a player, it wouldn't let you take it off them to be able to captain that player. So the main thing you want to make sure is that you do not put your vice captain on a player that you think you might want to captain. So in most scenarios, my suggestion would be to put the vice captain on your goalkeeper. The only exception to that is like what I have done, where my goalkeeper is my very first player. In that scenario where your goalkeeper is your very first player and you want to take a try at captaining them, then I would recommend putting the vice captain on a player that you know 100% sure you are not going to captain. So that is probably best to be a player where you have got 2 or more players from that team. So that's why I've got it on Elvedi, because I know if I'm changing to a captain from one of my Switzerland players, that the player I'm going to choose is going to be Xhaka, it won't be Elvedi, so it's fine to have the vice captain on him. But just definitely be careful with that. I've seen a few vice captains on Rafinha and Wirtz and stuff like that. You just don't want to do that, because you don't want to run the risk of not being able to captain them. And then for the subs, so my goalkeepers, I've got the one that's playing first on the 12th of June in my starting 11, and then the one that is playing on the 18th of June, my second one, is on the bench. And if I'm not happy with the score I get from my first goalkeeper, I'll sub my second one in. The one thing I'd recommend with this is, obviously, as soon as you know you're not happy with the score, you could just change it straight away, but I would personally recommend waiting until you get the team news so that you know that your second goalkeeper definitely starts, because you don't want to sub them in and then find out that they've not started and then be on 0 points from your goalkeeper when you could have been on, even if it was just 1 or 2, it's going to be better than 0 if the goalkeeper doesn't play. So wait for lineups. And then for the outfield subs, I have quite simply just got my 3 players that play last on the bench. So in this team, that is Nuno Mendes and Bruno Fernandes play on the 17th, and then Rodriguez is playing on the 18th, like my goalkeeper is. Similar thing to with the goalkeepers. Obviously, one way you could do it is just as soon as you've got a player that blank, you could just take them out of your team and bring one of the subs in. But what I would recommend doing, like I said with the goalkeeper, is just waiting until you've got the lineups. So with Nuno Mendes and with Bruno Fernandes, I'm going to wait until we get the Portugal lineups, make sure they're both in there. And once they are, because they probably will be, whoever the 2 lowest scoring players are in my outfield team, I'll move them to the bench. And then the same once we get to Rodriguez on the 18th, I'll have probably 1 more player in there that scored lowly. If Rodriguez is starting, then he comes in. Okay, so that is everything for my team selection. I've got 10 positions in my team that I'm really happy with and are pretty locked in, and then it is just going to be those 5 cheap differential goalkeepers and defenders that I need to decide on. Unfortunately, that's just not going to be something I'm going to be able to decide soon. I'm just going to have to wait essentially until right up until the deadline to see who's going to be under 5%. But if you do want to see who ends up in my final team, I will be posting that over on Twitter. So I'll leave the link to my Twitter down in the description so you can go and check that out there. If you found this video useful, please give it a like and also subscribe to my channel. My next video is going to be my first look for round 2, and that will be coming out on Sunday. So hopefully I will see you all then for that video. Bye.